Hello, and welcome to Why Am I Like This? The podcast for those who didn't get enough hugs as a child. I'm Laura Wood, and I'm a trauma therapist.
And I'm Michaela Beaver. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
So, Michaela, why are we doing this podcast?
I'm so glad you asked. We want to help you understand yourself a little bit better, how the things that you learned about yourself and the world in childhood are still affecting you today. We want to figure out, why are we like this? Those random questions about ourselves so that we might wonder about, why am I so jumpy? Why am I so anxious? Why do I take everything personally? Why are my thoughts so negative? Why do I feel like I have to fix everything all the time?
Yes, and we are talking about holding on to stuff today. And we're going to try to answer the following questions. Why can't I let go of things? Why do I keep buying stuff? And how do I start to let go? So let's get into it. What's the deal? Why do we have so much stuff that we can't let go of?
I think this is such an interesting topic to talk about. And I think that there's multiple causes for why we can't let go of things, or if we're actually truly like hoarding stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a spectrum, right? I think that we can be just someone who has entirely too much stuff, but like we're not quite into that hoarding level. And I think that we could, then there's people out there that literally, you see in the movies where there's just like literally boxes of piles of things, and it's like ways to get through their home. And so I think that, one of the things that comes up for me is that like I have a hard time getting rid of things. I think it's two things. When I was thinking about this, I was like, why is this hard? Right.
Yeah.
One, I think it's the fact that it seems like so much work, mm-hmm. right? Like I look at my closet and I'm like, I don't wear half of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Probably get rid of it. Then I start looking at the stuff and I'm like, oh, this is so much work. And what if I need that one thing someday?
Mm-hmm.
What if I want that thing? And I think that like, there might be like a negative, a thing from childhood, right? Like I think that like for me, I had this belief that I didn't have nice stuff as a kid. And I think that, that my perception of that as a kid was that like, that's why that was the root of my problems, right? Like just because I got my shirt from Walmart, it must be that that's the reason why I don't fit in, or that must be the reason why this thing happened. And so now when I look at those things, I'm like, that I think that there's probably some kind of like emotional tie to stuff. Like I don't like the feeling of not having stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I think that's one of the things that I came up with. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, because over the weekend, I was really trying to get rid of stuff. So I have a lot of, I moved into my house about 6 months ago, and I have like a handful of boxes that are still boxes. And I'm like, why is this happening? What do I need to do about it? Why can't I unpack this stuff? Like what, if it's in a box and it's been 6 months that I've lived here and I obviously haven't needed it or used it, like, why am I keeping it? What's going on here? So I really had to think about like, what am I doing and like, why? So I started to realize like for me, there's a few things that are going on. I sometimes have a scarcity mindset. And so what I mean by that is I sometimes feel like I won't have the ability to like buy more things, or I'm going to need something and I won't be able to afford to buy it. And I've already paid for this thing. And so I need to keep it just in case that I can't afford something in the future. Because I had a lot of years of my life where I really couldn't afford things. And I was, living in a really tough financial situation. And so I couldn't buy new things. I couldn't go out and get shoes for the kids when they needed them. And like that, like stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And so now it's like, I've got these pairs of shoes that are like too small for them, but I can't get rid of them because I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, that they need these shoes, but it's like, no, they don't need these shoes. They have shoes, and we can buy more shoes, or we can save up money to buy shoes. We can get another job if I need to. Like now I'm trying to switch into like an abundance mindset where like, I know that I know how to make money. I can make more money if I need to, if I had to get a second job, or if I had to go out and do, some side work, or, take on more work at work. Like so I'm trying to like give myself that mindset shift of like, I can do this because it'll be okay in the future. I'll be able to afford it. I'll be able to get what I need. So that's something that kind of sticks with me. Another thing that I was noticing is that I have this like emotional attachment to some stuff, especially when it has to do with the kids. So I'm like, okay, so there's these Nike shoes, right? And I'm like, what if these are like valuable someday? Or like, what if my kids want to like pass these on to their kids? Like, they're really cute and like they'd be retro and they'd be like this. So, like, what if they want to give them to their kids and like have them as part of their family, like, and whatever. So I have this like attachment to like, I don't want to get rid of my kids' things because I want them to be able to see and have like the stuff from their childhoods in the future. And then some stuff I was noticing, I was like, but I remember this day, like I got rid of a sweatshirt that I bought in Hawaii. And I was like, because that was like my souvenir for Hawaii trip, right? But I'm like, okay, it's a size extra small. That's not what size I wear. I'm not going to fit into that sweatshirt. I need to just move on from this sweatshirt. So I told myself, and we can get into this part a little bit later when we talk about letting go, but like, I told myself, I have the memories from this trip, right? I have the experience of this trip. I have that in my heart and in my mind, and I have photos and other things like that. So I don't have to keep this sweatshirt, right?
Yeah.
And then some of it was just like about the value of the thing. So I'm like going through all this, right? I'm like, okay, this thing has value. I could sell it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to sell this for what, $12 or something like that. Like these shoes for $12, like these used shoes. How much is that really worth like the time that it's going to take me? Like I might have to take, because I'm thinking, oh, I could take like 2 days off work and like sell all this stuff. I would make so much more money working those 2 days than I would by selling all of this stuff, even if I had the time to do it. So I had all of these different things running through my mind, and I could like hear myself justifying like why I'm holding on to this stuff. And it just was giving me so much anxiety because I also felt overwhelmed. I felt like I have so much, I don't know what to do with. I'm looking in this box and I just want to close it up and walk away. And I just don't want to deal with it. So it's like, sometimes I just avoid trying to take care of the stuff too. So it's just like a whole mess of stuff all at once.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. I know my office that I'm in right now had boxes in it for months. And I was seeing clients in my office with boxes all around me. And I just didn't want to go through all of the papers. It was going to take so much effort. It was like, just like you wanted to just ignore it because it was easier to ignore it than it was to go through and be like, all right, do I need my taxes from, 2006 now? No, I probably don't. So I probably could shred this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get rid of stuff that you think you might need again, right? Like I keep like all the little screws and nails, like from all the different like things that I put together. And it's like, they always have the extras. Like I keep but it's like, why am I keeping this when I'm not going to use it? It's like a tiny little screw, like a specialty item or something like that, that really only goes to one thing. And I don't even know what thing it goes to anymore.
Right.
So I might as well just move on from it and say, I don't have to hold on to this anymore. I don't have to keep this in my life anymore. It doesn't define me. It doesn't like having this doesn't like make my life easier or better in any way, so I just had to kind of try really hard and say, if I haven't used it or needed it in a year, then it probably doesn't belong in my home.
It's a good way to think about it. One of the other things that I think about for like hoarding is like OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in obsessive compulsive disorder, there can be a hoarding component to that. And so, it can be a brain related thing where our anterior cingulate especially is just overactive. And so one of our intrusive thoughts is to hang on to things. Maybe there's a compulsion, or the compulsion is to hang on to things. And maybe there's a thought that's going along with that. That's like, I can't get rid of this, or something bad's going to happen. Like maybe someone's going to die if I get rid of this. Like, so we can have some intrusive thoughts that lead to the compulsion of hoarding as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, there's some research showing that there might be a genetic component to hoarding behaviors as well. So like hoarding is when we compulsively, obsessively have to gather more things, and we can't let go of things, even if those things have no value, or they're wasteful, or they're dangerous or unsanitary. Like sometimes with hoarding, it's hard to even get rid of like trash. Anything that comes into the home stays in the home. And then it's also marked with the component of continuing to acquire things that we don't, that either we might not need or we might not use, but we have to kind of keep acquiring. So there's that, why do I keep buying stuff, component of it too, which in my opinion, buying stuff can act as like a comfort. It's like I'm coping with my distress. I'm controlling this. Like I'm going out and getting more things. And like, I get adrenaline from that, and I get dopamine from that. And I get this, like, it's an addiction to continuing to buy more things.
Yeah. It was interesting that I was, looking this up and thinking about this as I was thinking about this topic. And it was saying that there's a lot of comorbidities that go along with hoarding, including ADHD. So you think about like that desire to buy things, the impulsive nature of the disorder itself. And so we're impulsively, we're trying to seek dopamine to make us feel better. Same with like depression was another one of the ones. And so like if we're buying things to try to like cope with our depressive symptoms, to try to help make us feel better, that can lead to kind of those buying behaviors as well.
Yeah, I'm buying more and more things because that maybe shows my value. Maybe I don't feel like I have a lot of value. And so I seek out stuff that gives me the value. Like I am what I have. I feel like I have, if I have more, then I'm more secure. So like going back to that scarcity mindset, sometimes abundance is a sign of safety for people who have gone through scarcity.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I was talking about this with my mom, and she's the type of person that literally wants to get rid of everything. She has to actually tell herself, no, I actually might need this. Don't throw it away. And like convince herself not to throw it away. And we were talking about that. And she said that, my grandma, she wasn't a hoarder, but she didn't get rid of things. And she kind of kept everything out, like on the counters, and like setting it. It wasn't like tucked away, hidden, it was like, it didn't matter where it was kind of cluttered. And so growing up in that like environment actually made her have the opposite effect of just wanting to, like, not liking clutter, wanting to get rid of everything, feeling like that need to do the opposite.
That makes so much sense. Like when we see our parent like overly collecting or overly cluttered, and we live in that environment and we feel like, oh, this is too chaotic, I don't want to be like this. And then we sort of overcorrect and go the opposite way. And then we're throwing everything away. That makes so much sense.
But I do think that it could be like, that's just what I know. Right. And so I don't know to do anything different. Like nobody ever taught me like that this wasn't normal. So I leave everything. I collect all the things. I don't get rid of things because that's just what I think is the standard.
And also maybe we lack the organizational skills. Like you mentioned with ADHD, those executive functioning skills to organize and be orderly. Those skills are not inherent. Like those are often learned skills. We don't know how to do that. So there's a big link between hoarding and being chronically disorganized and having a hard time where not everything in your house has a place to live. Like not everything in your house has a place to belong. And so I think about that with my house. I'm a little bit of a cluttered person. I tend to have clutter. I don't always have a place for things to go. I probably should clean out my desk drawers because there's like things in here that I don't need. Like I could open my drawer right now and find oh, here's a poppet. Like, do I really need this? Oh, here's another one here. Maybe it doesn't belong in my desk drawer. Maybe I should put that where it belongs instead. So like a lot of the time for me, I don't put things where they belong. Like they don't have like a set home or whatever.
Mm.
And that can lead to clutter and mess. And my mom is the opposite. She is very organized and very orderly and keeps everything a certain way. And so sometimes I wish that I inherited that gene from her, but I did not.
Well, and I think too about like depression, like maybe you want to be an organized person, but like you just don't have the energy and the motivation to organize things or try to get rid of things. But, buying things makes us feel better. So we just keep collecting and collecting and collecting. And yet like we just don't, it doesn't actually solve the thing that the emptiness or the sadness. And then we don't have them, we never get out of this rut. And so then we never have the motivation. It just feels like so much work to even get off the couch, much less try to go organize or get rid of things. And so things collect over time.
Yeah. And it sneaks up on you. It's a little bit like a frog in a boiling water, right? It's like all of a sudden you just have like this pile of stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't gone through my mail in 7 weeks and there's probably important things in there. And I just let it sit on this pile and add it up and add it up.
Wow.
And so for those of us who don't have those organizational skills, we have to be really mindful and really intentional about like, I'm going to do this right now. Like one of my kids is very organized and he does a really good job of being orderly. And so he gets frustrated with us when we don't take our trash bins in from the street like that next day, right?
Yeah.
Like he's like, why don't we just do it right now? Like it needs to get done just to get it done. And I'm a little bit of a procrastinator. And so we have to be self-aware in that and to know like what it is that we're capable of, what our strengths are, and then what our weaknesses are. And so we have to do the opposite of some of those weaknesses. Like for me, I'll be like, oh, I'll get that later. No,
Right.
I'm going to get it now. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to get it now. Or, the day that I check the mail, I'm going to go through the mail and I'm going to sort it and I'm going to file these things away. I have a filing cabinet, right?
That's
So
hard.
but it is really hard. And so I think for some of us, there could be like genetic components, brain stuff going on.
Well, the other thing that what you were saying made me think about was the negative feeling component of it. Like
Mhm.
I feel so guilty for having bought all those things that I didn't need and didn't return because I didn't get to it or whatever. And then, so like now I have to, or I didn't get the mail and I missed this bill. And so now just even confronting those negative feelings, it just feels too overwhelming and too guilt. Like it just makes me feel worse. So it's easier just to ignore that they even exist.
Yeah, that's such a good point. There's negative feelings associated too with like getting rid of things. Like it's a loss. Like I don't get to have this in my life anymore. Maybe I didn't use this. Like I bought this for a purpose and I never used it. Or, maybe it's something from my childhood and it brings up really fond memories and I'm getting rid of that. And it feels like I'm throwing that part of myself away. Or maybe it's something that I made. Maybe it's like a homemade item or a handmade item or something like I worked really hard on. And now there's no more room for it or I don't need it anymore. I think there's so many negative feelings associated with not having those things anymore or with getting rid of them, and kind of having to confront those feelings can be really hard.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes up when it comes to like not wanting to or wanting to keep buying more things or not wanting to let go of old things is that the things that are there for you, right? So like something that got me through a really hard time, let's say like a special item, a comfort item of sorts. I might not want to get rid of that item because it helped me through a really hard time and I feel beholden to that item. I feel like that item, I owe that item things. Like I've personified it in a way. I've made it, part of me where, it did so much for me. I want to keep it and honor it and cherish it. And I can't think of that item as just a thing.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a tie with that, with like maybe attachment trauma, like, from childhood or whatever, that might be more likely to develop into, having that personification of an item.
I do think so. I think when we are emotionally attached to our items, like there's definitely a void being filled there, right? Like there's definitely something going on where perhaps I suffered a loss or I suffered a loss of attachment in childhood that made me need to collect more things. And that makes me feel really sad and upset and maybe even unsafe when I don't have those things with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that being hard. And I think like, you know, I personally go back to that, like, I just might need this someday. Like, I feel like that's a huge piece of it is like, I just might need this someday. And how do I know? I can't know the future. So like, how do I know that I won't need it someday? And I think that like leads me to believe that like there is a piece of this where you have to start doing a little bit of that cognitive restructuring where you're like, okay, even if I do need it someday, I can be okay even if I don't have it, right? And so being able to talk yourself through that and say like, even if I do want it or wish I had it, that doesn't mean that I can't be okay in that moment. I can get another one. There's other ways that I can go around this and still be able to survive, right? It might be difficult, but it's not dangerous, like you always say.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think when we are worried that we're going to need it someday, there's some scarcity stuff going on. And so there's some life threat happening in there. And we get a little worked up thinking like, I won't be able to survive without this. So you kind of have to reframe that. But you can also, realize that if you do need it, you can either buy another one, you can borrow one, you can do all of these things to get it, but also like, what's happening to you now because you have it, right? So like shifting back into the present and saying like, okay, I might need this someday, but I don't need it now. And it taking up this space and getting in my way and being part of a pile of things that gives me anxiety is actually causing me harm right now. Like having it is causing me harm. Even if in the future I might need it, it's not the future, it's today. And today this item is not helping me. It's not helping me achieve my goals. One thing that, stands out as a good way to start like making those decisions is what are my goals right now? Right? Like not necessarily what are my goals in the future and what happened in the past. Because collecting stuff, you're collecting stuff for your past or you're collecting stuff for your future. You're not doing it for the present. You're saying, I'm either holding on to things from the past that make me feel a certain way, which I can get that feeling another way. Maybe I can take a picture of all of those items. Maybe I can make a collage of these items. Maybe I can do this, like store them in a way that doesn't take up that space. And then if I'm doing something for the future, like I'm planning for the future, I might get to that someday. I'm going to do this project. I'm going to do this thing that I bought these supplies for, or I have these supplies for something that might come up. But realizing that it's not then, it's now. And so am I going to use it right now? Or am I going to start that project today? If the answer is no, then I'm really not living in the present. I'm really living in the future or the past.
Oh my gosh. So you were just saying that. I literally pictured like 5 different things that I was like, oh, yeah, that's me right now. I have some things, right? Not hoarding level things, but I have like some things, right? Or you're like, oh man, I have all those t-shirts and sweatshirts that maybe someday I'll make a like blanket out of. And you're just like, no, I'm never going to do that. I don't have time. And it's never going to happen.
Yeah. It's never going to happen. And if you want it to happen, are you going to make it happen right now? Right. So like, as you think about, okay, am I going to get rid of these things or do I want to make that blanket? Let me go and I'm going to search for a company that makes blankets out of old things and I'm going to ship them today. Right. And so I'm going to have that blanket and then I'm going to go ahead and donate the scraps and the rest of the stuff. Like, because I'm going to have that as my keepsake. Right. So like, it's not that we have to get rid of everything. It's that we have to do the thing that we have the thing for. And we have to make it necessary. Like we have to make it part of our present day and part of our current life. Or we can decide that that's not something that's important to us.
Yeah, I like that. I think that, when it comes to, hoarding on like an obsessive compulsive level, I think that that's a whole more complicated scenario. We may not be able, it's not going to be as easy to just talk ourselves through, that one. I think that that's going to take some higher levels of either medications or intense therapy to try to work through some of those intense, intrusive thoughts
Mhm.
that are leading to that compulsive hoarding. So, when we're talking about this, we understand that there is a lot, it can be more difficult than just saying, okay, I'm going to do something with it. But, there are things and people out there that can support you through making those decisions and coming up with a plan and taking steps in the right direction as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there's levels, there's this spectrum, but also, one of the things that we do, one of the things that comes up with hoarding and collecting behaviors, things like that, is actually that it serves as an avoidance mechanism for our feelings of like past trauma. So sometimes that stuff can cover up really uncomfortable feelings and really difficult distress that we've been distracting ourselves from all this time. And so as you do start going through this process of, it's a new year, we're maybe moving through some things that we don't need anymore. We're trying to make a clean slate. Maybe you're getting started, thinking about spring cleaning, whatever. As you do start to let go of things, you might notice like really uncomfortable feelings coming up. And that could be an indicator that there's deeper work to do, even if you're not at that hoarding level.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's such a good, like, unique way of thinking about it that I hadn't thought about before, that it could uncover some things. And so that's a good point to make.
Yeah, our layers of stuff can kind of be layers of distraction and layers of identity that we are sort of covering up other stuff with. I think that happens quite a bit when we talk about addressing symptoms. Sometimes that can disrupt what those symptoms are protecting against, like what they're protecting us from knowing and protecting us from realizing and protecting us from dealing with. So sometimes holding on and buying stuff are symptoms of a deeper problem. They can also be addiction related.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're talking about that, what came up for me was maybe like having grace for ourselves, like even if we're trying to walk this path and it is hard, that knowing that that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And knowing that like it's going to be a journey. It may not be as easy as just like saying, oh, I don't need this right now. Okay. Thanks thing for, giving me joy when I had it and needed it, and I don't need it anymore. So we're just going to get rid of it. It might be more complicated than that. So, if you're trying to do the things and you try to go get rid of that thing and you're like, oh, it just makes me feel too bad, then knowing that that's okay and that it's going to be a little bit more of a journey and a process to try to work through those things. But it's like a warning bell, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, there's like ding, ding, ding. Okay, there is more to this than just me not wanting to get rid of it or me being lazy. Maybe there's something else going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of us aren't doing things because we're just lazy or like not that smart, or we don't like, or we're, something negative about us. It's usually that we're dealing with something and we're coping with distress in some way. And, buying and keeping things can be that too. And I think about people who have lived through really hard times. Like I was talking about in the beginning, like, if you've experienced scarcity, especially like food scarcity or, things like that in the past, it's really hard to let go of things once you've acquired them, because that's a trauma. And so that's important to work through. That's important to recognize, like, I'm coping with this in this way, and that's not necessary. There's other ways that I can handle this and I can be healthy and healed.
Which then also makes me think of like having grace for our partners. That might be this. Like, this may not be talking about you, but you might be married to or dating someone who is
Yeah.
experiencing these things. And so maybe this is an alternative way of viewing it, of being like, oh, there's something deeper going on here. And how can I support this person in their journey? And recognizing that maybe there's more work that they can do.
Mm-hmm. And, teaching, when we're thinking about our partners and our families, teaching our kids how to let go of things that they don't need anymore by donating them, and recognizing that other people can use our old things, or saying, I like what you said about thank you thing for bringing me joy when I needed you, and like thank you for being a part of my life, and now I'm gonna move, like you're gonna move on to somebody else's life and something else, and a different, or I'm gonna repurpose this thing and turn it into a blanket, or I'm gonna whatever. Like,
Mhm.
I think teaching our kids how to organize for themselves, like those executive functioning skills that we didn't necessarily learn, or that we didn't necessarily hold on to, because like I'm sure I could have learned them, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Like my mom has the skills, I don't have the skills. So
I know. I think that that's one of the things that I tell a lot of my ADHD patients, right? I'm like, your brain, especially adults that didn't get diagnosed until
right,
being an adult, I'm like, these are skills that you should have learned or could have learned if you were given the resources back then and you didn't. And so these are really hard things that you're going to have to learn now as an adult. Like it's not just as simple as taking a medicine. All of a sudden I'm an organized human being. I'm not. I have
right.
to learn some skills to manage the organization that, like you said, everything needs a place, right? That takes time and energy, and it brings up negative feelings of why did almost 40 years old, why didn't I learn this thing already? And so there's a lot of it's hard.
hmm And there can be a lot of shame in like, how did I let it get this bad? Or, why haven't I done this better? Like, what's wrong with me? I'm not a good person, or I'm not a smart person, or I'm not a capable person, all those negative beliefs about ourselves that come in when we have shame, and when we're blaming. So I love what you said about giving ourselves grace and giving our partners grace, and really allowing this to be a journey and a process, and not something that we just are like, oh, I'm now all of a sudden I'm supposed to be this whole different way.
Yeah, that's not realistic, and will create a whole lot more stress. I know, like we're in the new year, and everybody wants to create resolutions and goals, and they're like, yes, now I'm just not this person, and it's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
That person, you just are on a journey to change those things. Thinking about that default mode network of things, like we have created this way of being, and it's so ingrained in us that it's there, and we don't have to think about it.
It's routine, it's habit, it's
Yeah.
autopilot.
Yeah, it's autopilot. And like some of these decisions that we're making are not calculated decisions day in and day out. They're just things that are just happening because that's just how we survived.
And that's where mindfulness comes in too. Mindfulness and being in the present are a way for you to start making intentional decisions instead of living in that default mode. I think those are really great skills to start learning, especially if you have a resolution. To be able to keep that resolution, you might need to incorporate some mindfulness too.
Yeah, I love that. And so, is there a way that you would start having someone start using mindfulness that maybe, has never used it before, might have a very busy, active brain, and it's hard for them to, be in the present moment, or do that those mindfulness techniques?
One thing that I think can be really helpful is actually like those coloring books. Um, because they make you concentrate. So like if your brain is really active, you have to kind of concentrate on those things. And even if you spend maybe like 5 to 10 minutes just doing a little bit of those adult coloring books or whatever. I know it sounds silly, but they're not just for fun. Like they really do help your brain settle and stay settled. When I'm doing neurofeedback, um, I can see the brain calm down when engaging with like art or coloring. Like you can actually like see your brain like shift into a calmer mode when you're engaging in some of those activities. So that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that like there's some, like it's a sensory thing. Like you're engaging in like the feel of like the color, like what you're doing, and then you're seeing progress. Like you get to see it come together and it's starting to take form. And I think that can be really like part of that like healing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's not just nothing. Some people think of mindfulness as just like nothingness. And it's not. You can have a goal, you can set something, you can, if you can count the leaves on the plants in your house, you can do a task while being mindful, and you're noticing, okay, what else am I noticing about that plant? Like, oh, there's life there. There's abundance there. These are signals of safety. These are signals of life and vitality. Yeah. And so when I notice things like that, I feel better. So noticing nature, counting the trees, like going for a walk, exploring.
Even right? Like it's sensory. Like you can be like, wow, the water's so warm. I'm seeing bubbles. Like, look at this plate get clean, right? Like you're not mindlessly doing a task. You can be engaged in the task and be present and feeling your body and feeling the senses and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're doing the dishes, the mindfulness part is paying attention. Is paying attention to noticing all of those things. Like you said, the bubbles and the plates and the feeling of it and the warmth of the water, all of those things, noticing your senses and what your senses are bringing in. That's mindfulness. And you can do it during anything.
I love that. And people, that are very busy can notice that they don't have to stop what they're doing to be mindful and be present.
Yes. I love that. That's a really good point. Well, I think that's a good place to end it today on our mindfulness journey to keeping our resolutions and being more orderly and letting go of things. Thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you for listening to Why Am I Like This? If you like our show, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Follow the show and share it with your friends. This episode was written and produced by me, Laura Wood, and Michaela Bieber. Our theme song is Making Ends Meet by Thick as Thieves, and a special thanks to Beneberry Counseling and Coaching and Active Healing Psychiatric Services for sponsoring this show.